Fire is one of the three types that Pokemon fans get acquainted with right away, so the expectation is that it's a decent middle-of-the-road type. But believe it or not, Fire used to be terrible. But amidst Pokemon's many competitive changes over the years, Fire has quietly been on an upswing, to the point where it could almost be considered the best type in the game. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and this is the history of the Fire type. So like I said, in Gen 1, Fire type is kinda bad. Which is surprising, because Fire is one of the more exclusive types in this generation, and almost all of them, like Charizard, Arcanine, Ninetales, and Rapidash, have relatively high base stat totals. And Fire is, and only ever has been, weak to three types: Water, Ground, and Rock. But unfortunately, these three types combined encompass roughly a third of the Kanto Pokedex. And unlike many other types that didn't get good until later generations, these three types had their old reliables from the very beginning. Hydro Pump, Earthquake, and Rock Slide have always been here, and always have been learnable by almost everything, including normal types who dominated the Gen 1 meta. So those are honestly like an extra weakness for Fire. On top of that, Fire types generally speaking have very poor coverage in Gen 1. There's no Thunder Fang or Wild Charge to expand their move pools, and almost all of them are built as physical attackers for some reason, in a game where Fire was meant to be a special move, and almost all the moves they learn are exclusively Fire. Sometimes I really do wonder how Pokemon started this way. So yeah, Gen 1, kind of a dud. And unfortunately, Gen 2 is more of the same. Almost every new Fire type introduced here aside from Entei and Ho-Oh are competitive no-shows. So, pretty much on par with most of Gen 2's new Pokemon. Pretty much the only thing that happened for Fire in this generation was the introduction of Sunny Day as a move, which I honestly thought was from Gen 1 all this time, but apparently weather wasn't real until Gen 2, so that's fascinating. But it really won't matter for another few generations at least. Fire is definitely a good type for Johto's main story playthrough, as it gets you past Bugsy, Jasmine, Price, and most of the Elite Four with relative ease. But competitively speaking, this type was in trouble, despite being one of the fan favorite types and one that most new fans often gravitate towards. It really wouldn't be until Gen 3 where we finally started seeing things shift towards Fire's direction. First, the introduction of Hidden Power finally allowed most Fire types to have at least one non-Fire type coverage option to hit their weaknesses with. And Hidden Power Grass just so happened to be the perfect candidate to hit all three. Plus, Grass being a special type meant that the vast majority of special attacking Fire types could take advantage of this option. As a result, you saw Fire types like Moltres, Charizard, Typhlosion, Arcanine, and Houndoom all shoot up the tier list in this generation. Gen 3 also introduced a couple of staple moves for Fire types moving forward. Heat Wave, a multi-target attack that ignores allies, pretty much just the better version of Muddy Water for Fire types in doubles. Which of course matters because starting in Gen 4, we got the VGC format where double battles are exclusively used. And the second move was Will-O-Wisp. If you watched my video on the disparity between Pokemon status conditions, then you already know why Will-O-Wisp was a big deal. But to give a quick synopsis, this is one of the better status conditions since it has the power of any Pokemon's physical moves, and since it's a permanent status unlike Sleep or Freeze, it pretty much takes any burned physical attacker out of contention for the rest of the match. Except in rare scenarios where they have a Lum Berry or Heal Bell to deal with it. So while Fire didn't get the most explicit buffs in Gen 3, Game Freak was quietly starting to cook with this type. Well, in every department except the Pokemon themselves. Blaziken is pretty good, but aside from him, Camerupt is horrible, Sunny Castform is a meme, and Torkoal, well, we'll come back to him later, but as of this moment in time, he sucks. Thankfully, Gen 4 will be the first generation to introduce Fire types that were truly built for competition. Infernape was basically just Blaziken with better distributed stats and actually had speed to take advantage of its offenses. Remember, Speed Boost Blaziken doesn't exist yet. And Game Freak would introduce a Pokemon that was almost entirely future-proofed, Heatran. As a legendary Pokemon tied to the story, Heatran may seem like one of the most underwhelming ones, but in competitive gameplay, this Pokemon is the definition of consistency. Sitting in the OU tier now for 6 consecutive generations, and whenever it's legalized in VGC, Heatran almost always sees a high amount of usage from top players. It even has 2 World Championships under its belt in 2013 and 2015. The reason for this is due to its high special attack stat in tandem with the aforementioned Heat Wave, making it one of the best multi-target damage dealers, having pretty high defense that allows it to stay in the fight for a long time, a pretty good type combination that makes it immune to 2 statuses, and it even has Earth power to knock out other Heatrans. It's genius! And in singles, it's just one of those Pokemon that can do virtually anything. Stealth Rocks, Roar, Will-O-Wisp, Magma Storm, Taunt, it has all the tools to be successful. Beyond these two Pokemon, Gen 4 also introduced Flare Blitz, one of those big anime type attacks where you use all your power to take down your enemy, but you sacrifice yourself in the process. It's so cool. And in online battles, both singles and doubles, recoil attacks like Flare Blitz are actually really good, because even if you take yourself down in the process, then the game still declares you the winner because the user of the move feints after the Pokemon defending from the move. So even if you use it to score a big KO and tie the game, it's actually a great play. And Fire really needed a big, powerful move like this because there's only 4 types that resist Fire. So more often than not, Flare Blitz can score a KO when you really need it, which is why it's one of the most used recoil attacks to this day. In Gen 5, Fire would receive its biggest buff yet with the advent of legalized weather conditions. Now that Drought was no longer exclusive to Groudon and Ninetales was available to set up Sunlight, the weather wars had truly begun. Gen 5 also introduced 2 more pretty amazing fire types that have stood the test of time with Victini and Volcarona. And for the most part, these Pokemon have been pretty immune to power creep, just getting better almost every generation. In fact, Volcarona is peaking right now. This Pokemon is absolutely busted in Generation 9, but that's another point we'll have to come back to. I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. This generation also gave us Simisear. What, did you expect me to say something about it? No, it's just a statement of fact. There's nothing significant about it. At this point in time, Fire has been elevated from a subpar type to a slightly above average one. But more significant than anything, Gen 5's dragon-dominated meta set the stage for what was to come in the near future. As we're all well aware of by now, Gen 6 had to smite the overpowered dragons with the introduction of Fairy. And with Fairy quickly becoming one of the best types in the game, if not the best for a short while, Fire also benefited from this, as it gained an extra resistance and it's one of only 3 types that does resist Fairy, which will be very, very important when we start talking about things like Fluttermane here in a few minutes. Significant fire types in this generation include Talonflame, who is basically just a footnote in history because Game Freak turned this boy into the roasted bird the next generation. He is cooked. And in the singles meta, where he's allowed, Volcanion's pretty darn good, just because Fire-Water is a really versatile type combination and his signature move is just Scald on steroids, so duh, it's busted. Generation 7, Incineroar. Need I say more? Although in singles, the real standout Pokemon from this generation is Blacephalon, a Pokemon I forget even exists half the time. But basically, this is just Chandelure on crack. Fire and Ghost is an amazing offensive type combination. Flamethrower and Shadow Ball basically hits everything for neutral or better damage. And with Beast Boost, it's just one of those glass cannons that can absolutely steamroll a team with the right opportunity. But more broadly speaking, this generation was a huge buff for Fire because Torkoal got Drought, finally replacing Ninetales, who was really struggling to keep up with the meta with its rather middling stats. Torkoal is at least a Pokemon who can set up Sun and tank physical moves, so it has that going for it. Plus, with Trick Room in effect, this thing can switch in and start firing off eruptions boosted by the sun, which is crazy strong at full HP. And because of that, this Pokemon has exploded in popularity on the VGC side over the past several years. It really only took this one ability change to catapult Torkoal from the bottom to the top, and it actually carried several other Fire-type attackers with it. And Torkoal only got better in Gen 8 with Body Press, giving it another option to attack with that isn't a Fire-type move. Other than that, Gen 8 just gave us Cinderace, which I think we've discussed enough in other videos. Yeah, it's just stupid good. But the more important thing that happened in Gen 8 that also carried into Gen 9 was the emergence of Steel as the new front-running type in the game. With Gen 7 being the peak of Fairy type's dominance, new amazing Steel types had to be rolled out in troves in the aftermath. And then Generation 9 with the terrestrialization mechanic, Steel is often one of the most popular Terra types because of how many resistances it has. And guess which type is the best at defeating Steel? Yup, it's Fire. So basically, Dragon type being broken in Gen 5 set up this long domino effect for Fire to become one of the most important types in the game. Dragons were broken, so Fairy was introduced, Fairy became the best type, so Steel had to be buffed up to balance it, and now that Steel has taken over, Fire is there to counter it. In fact, many competitive players in this moment now rank Fire somewhere between the 4th and 2nd best type in the entire game. A huge upgrade from where it was in the first handful of generations. It has also immensely helped that past Paradox Pokemon get a boost from Sunlight, so Sun is just by far the best weather condition in the game right now. It gives a 50% power boost to Fire-type attacks, which again are amazing for offense. It weakens Water, another one of the game's best types. It activates Chlorophyll for Grass types, Photosynthesis for Paradox Mons. You have 2 of the best weather setters in the game with Torkoal and Koraidon in this format. Sunlight is truly unmatched right now. And really, aside from Scovillain, Game Freak kinda ate with all the new fire types this gen. Skeledirge is amazing both offensively and defensively. Armarouge and Ceruledge are both highly offensive threats. Iron Moth has some of the craziest coverage in the game. Chi-Yu, come on guys, Chi-Yu! Ogerpon Hearthflame, Gouging Fire, we have never gotten so many good fire types in a single generation. On top of that, fire type is one of the types that benefit the most from terrestrialization. As like I said with Hidden Power in Gen 3, grass is the perfect type for almost any fire type to Terra into, since it counters all three of fire's weaknesses. This is mostly the reason why we've seen Pokemon like Volcarona and Heatran become even bigger threats than ever before this generation. When you tie all these factors together, fire stands out as one of the best types currently in Pokemon. It's at hard counter Steel and Fairy, and thanks to Sunlight and Terra Grass, it has numerous options to deal with the always good water and ground types, making this one of the greatest comeback stories in Pokemon history. So let me know down below, who is your favorite fire type Pokemon? Obviously you know who mine is. I hope. And oh hey, by the time this video goes up, I will be in Hawaii for the World Championships, so if you happen to see me there, then be sure to say hello. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.